You ready, Victoria? All right, folks, it's 5:30, so we're continuing on with the meeting that we started last night and had the adjournment. Can I just please remind people that, this is a new environment, having it online. Please don't use the chat function. If you've got a question or if you've got a comment or want to contribute to the meeting, please do that through me. The chat function can get a bit distracting. We don't chat in council meetings to each other, and it's probably better that we don't chat here. So while I appreciate that that it has been used, because this is a new environment and we are getting used to things, so I prefer it isn't used at this time. I think we finished last night at item 9.6, I think is the next one that we need to go to, which is the Local Government Association annual general meeting, appointment of delegates. We could probably do this one on block unless anybody has any wish to do each part of the item individually. So the first being receiving and noting the appointment of delegates report. The second one being appointing myself as the voting delegate and Deputy Mayor Councillor Carol Schofield as the proxy delegate for the 2021 LGA general meeting. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales, and seconded by Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to that? No?
No, thank you.
Does anybody want to speak to it, or do you have any questions? No? I'll pop it to the vote then. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 10.1. Sorry, my agenda, some of the pages didn't type out, print out, so some it takes me a while. So the agenda, this 10.1 is around the festivals and events sponsorship program, and the first recommendation is that council receive and note the report. Someone would like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconded by Councillor Henderson. Thank you. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Does anybody want to speak to that or have any questions in relation to receiving the report? All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. The second recommendation is that council approve the festivals and events sponsorship program guidelines. Subject to the adoption of funding 2021 plan and budget. Do I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. And seconded by? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, I do. I think this is a good effort that's been done here by Stacey. I looked through this a couple of times and I really wonder what we're doing. I mean, I remember back earlier in this council when we sought to provide some rationality to our support for events and festivals in this city, and we talked about sorting out the sort of the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. We're talking about major events that we know are on each year: Rotary Art Show, the Tuna Festival, the Rock and Roll Festival, etc. And then there should be others that are either emerging events, ones that are operated at a very much lower level. We've only got $35,000 in this program. And my goodness, isn't the application program for this convoluted, extended, and very costly? Costly to run and costly to...
Mayor, I'm going to move that we put the vote, please. I think we've crossed this ground before in a workshop. I'd like to put the vote.
That's a formal motion. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. I put the vote. All those in favour of putting the vote. So this is a formal motion and the motion is to put the vote. We're not voting on the recommendation, just to clarify that for people. So the motion is to put the vote. All those in favour of putting the vote? And those against putting the vote? That is lost, Councillor Litterly. Carry on, Councillor Robertson.
What I'm concerned about in this process here is that we have made this overly complicated for what is a very small amount of money. It takes up a lot of staff time to do this. And we also need to speed up the processing. Plus the twice a year program we have for putting out providing support for these festivals and events comes at a time for many when it's going to be too early to be effective and too late to be able to make it acceptable. So while I appreciate all the effort that's gone on in terms of this grants program, I think it's not efficient in the sense of it being one that leads us to be able to really advance our objectives of making the city a major place that's known for putting on and successfully implementing major events. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak to the motion? No. Does anybody have any questions or anybody want to speak to the motion? If not, there's no debate on that, so there's no reply to the debate. Councillor Robertson as the mover. I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Sorry, can you put your hands up again? It's a bit difficult. I have to count them just to make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those against? 1, 2, 3. That motion is carried. Thank you. I will ask the CEO to talk through items. Well, actually, what I'll do first of all is I'll see if there's any volunteers for the Festival and Events Sponsorship Assessment Panel, which is item 4. If we have more than 3 people who would like to be on that panel, I'll ask the CEO to talk us through how we're going to do the nominations over the Zoom meeting. Because we're not in person, we won't be able to do that ballot in person, but we won't need to do the ballot if there's only 3 people volunteering for the panel. So do I have anyone that's interested in the panel? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Councillor Henderson? If nobody else is interested, I'm happy to be on the panel, but I'm happy for somebody else to be on the panel as well if they would prefer. No, just Councillor Schofield, Councillor Henderson and Mayor Jenkins. Can I just ask again, is anybody else interested? No. In that case, then we'll go to recommendation 4. And that recommendation is that Council appoint Councillor Schofield, Councillor Henderson and Mayor Jenkins to the Festival and Events Sponsorship Panel to assess the sponsorship applications and to make subsequent recommendations. Do I have someone move that way? Thank you, councillor Hales, and seconded councillor Littley. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Littley?
Yeah, just quickly, I would have liked to have nominated myself into that one of those roles, but given that I'll be presenting some probably some things forward for festivals and sponsorship programs, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to be sitting on that board. I might miss my opportunity to do some work in the community.
Thank you, councillor Littley. Does anybody else have any comments or any questions in relation to that item? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. We now move to 10.3. 10.2, which is also missing from my, oh, here we are, I beg your pardon. Yep, I found it. 10.2, the Arts and Culture Grants Program. This can probably be done en bloc if everybody's happy with that. So would somebody like to move 10.2 en bloc? Thank you, councillor Littley. And seconded by councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to the motions? Councillor Littley? No. Councillor Henderson? No. Does anybody have any comments or questions or want to speak to them? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. We now move to 10.3, Arts and Culture Centre Community Engagement. The recommendations I can do en bloc again. And would somebody like to move those recommendations en bloc? Councillor Robertson. And seconded by? Thank you, councillor Henderson. Councillor Robertson, would you like to speak to the recommendations?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to also amend vary the recommendations to replace recommendation 2 with a recommendation that I've sent through to the council later on this afternoon. I'm sorry, it wouldn't have got to you before an hour ago, but it's in writing, and I sent it also to elected members as well.
That recommendation, councillor Robertson, won't be a variation because it's substantially different from.
Then an amendment.
Can you just hold on a moment? I'm just talking to the CEO. Well, he's got to have the councillor Henderson has got to agree to the variation. Okay. Right. Sure. I beg your pardon, councillor Robertson. You can vary that if you want to, because you are the mover of that recommendation, but you can only vary it with the approval of the seconder. So, councillor Henderson, I don't know if you've had a chance to read councillor Robertson's recommendation.
I haven't seen it, no.
It would be in your emails, Marilyn, I think, if I might say through the chair.
Could you read your recommendation out, councillor Robertson, so that all of the elected members are clear on what you're recommending, and councillor Henderson is happy with the variation?
Mayor, before you do, may I just interject, please?
If it's very brief, if it's a question.
Yeah, it's brief. When a person is speaking, I've got the participant up on screen. I can see that particular person. Everybody else is minimised. When when you speak, there's no picture of yourself. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. I would really like to see you rather than just see the Victor Harbour emblem in the middle of my screen.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you know, I
If
think
you
the
go,
guests online would like to see your reactions as well, please.
if you go up to the right-hand side of your computer, it's got
view.
To view, click on view and choose
I understand that.
and choose gallery view.
I have, so we're all present there in small font. So you're not going to. All right. Okay, that's what you want. Thank you.
That's how you get to see everyone. Councillor,
We don't need to see everyone when they're not speaking. We do need to see them when they're speaking, and we don't see you at all if I put it on the other setting. There's only 2 settings there. I'm quite familiar with it.
I've got 3 people talking to me at once at the moment. Sorry, Councillor Charles. I'll try and sort out your issue. I beg your pardon, Councillor Robertson.
Do you want me to read the recommendation, Mayor?
Yes, if you read the recommendation while I'm working here with what the other 2 are saying to me, I'll try and sort Peter Charles out in terms of your problem too, Peter. But if, Councillor Robertson, if you read your recommendation, then that'd be good.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. My replacement recommendation 2 reads as follows. The council note the proposed design directions outlined in attachment B and the proposed next steps, but also confirms that circumstances now require that the design directions to the ARM team give emphasis to, number 1, the Arts and Culture Centre total costs to be reduced from 24.5 million to 18 million. Every big design cost item has to be critical to centre success. Can flexible seating in the town hall be designed? This feature can be included at a future date.
I do beg your pardon, Councillor Robertson, and excuse the interruption. But is that your Is that your variation, or are you talking? I'm unsure what your variation is. What is your recommendation that you are wanting to vary?
Is that essentially, Mayor, that the recommendation 2, as presented in our agenda, is not very clear as to what the council wants in this critical pathway to the development of an arts and culture centre.
I can understand, sorry, Councillor Robertson, once again, I can understand what you're trying to say, but I need to have a recommendation for a variation to the recommendation for Councillor Henderson to either agree to and also for Karina to write down. I'm unsure whether or not you're debating your recommendation or explaining it, or whether you're providing a recommendation to the elected body.
A point of order, please, Mayor Jenkins. David Kemp.
What's your point of order, Councillor Kemp?
Councillor Robertson is not trying to do a variation. What he's doing is just submitting a new recommendation. So I think Councillor Robertson needs to identify, is this a new recommendation, or as an alternative recommendation, or is it a variation, or is it an amendment?
I don't accept your point of order, Councillor Kemp. There is a mover and a seconder, and if Councillor Robertson wants to vary the motion, he needs the seconder to say that they're happy for that variation. So I don't accept your point of order. Councillor Robertson, what is your variation?
I was in the middle of reading it out, Mayor. Do you want me to read it out? Because unfortunately, I sent it a bit late this afternoon, so it could be put on screen. Not thinking that you can't actually see stuff on screen. So I come back to the essence of my recommendation is that the recommendation, as we have in the agenda, is very vague. It does not give good direction to the architect or to the administration as to what the council wants to be achieved out of this project. And what I've tried to do in my placement or a new recommendation, whatever it is in the processes, I want to achieve is to make sure that the council is making it very clear to both the architects and the administration as to what it wants to come from the next steps. At present, the recommendation 2 is very vague. It just simply says, you know, do what's in the next steps. But there are critical issues out there, such as costs, such as what are the priorities, such as staging of the project, and such that we need to stop having any further new design features, because we already know that the Arts and Culture Centre as we have it now is perhaps unaffordable.
Councillor
So-
Robertson, if I may just interject, apologies, but what you did forward in, you didn't send it to all elected members. I have just forwarded it out to all elected members because you had only actually sent it to myself and the Mayor. So all elected members would have your
Sorry,
variation, and it was a variation because you moved and Marilyn Henderson seconded what was recommended by the staff. If at the time of moving you had said you're moving an alternate recommendation, that would have been different. But I also had responded back to you just prior to the meeting because I had suggested that adding a point 3, which probably would be a little clearer in terms of adding in the things that you need in a direction to ARM in regards to their further work on the concept plans, because I felt that your proposed variation was a little complicated and it also contradicted yourself because new design elements may actually look to save costs. By introducing no new design elements, you may actually limit the ability to reduce those costs. So I'm not sure whether you've seen my addition of the point 3, which I've just sent to you, where I've just added in, just find it for you, where I've suggested a point 3 that the design directions explore options for reducing the overall cost of the Arts and Cultural Centre to below 20 million. This can include design options, staging of construction, etc.
Yeah, CEO, I'm happy with that, but principally what I'm doing is putting forward to the chamber that what we need to do as a council when we reach critical points in the development of projects, big and important projects like the Arts and Culture Centre, is that we send very clear messages as a council, as elected members, as to what we want to see in the outcomes that come from this process. And at present, I just felt that the way that the recommendations we had at present were not setting out clear guidelines on really important issues like costs and, you know, to what extent we wanted, you know, to see different features in the design, because what we have at present is increasing costs of the design budget being proposed, and also we've been through a very exhaustive and excellent engagement process, but there's a point comes when we need to say, you know, as a council, you know, narrow it down to and give direction to the architect so that they know what they have to do, and that's what I'm trying to do. But I accept that what your point 3 is pretty good. I'm more interested. It's not. I put down what I thought would be the key elements in the recommendation, but I'm most interested in what the other elected members think.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Henderson, you seconded the motion. Are you happy for that variation, or do you want to go with the original motion?
I'd like to go with the original motion. I appreciate what Councillor Robertson's trying to say, but I've now read the email and what I'm reading is much too complex. In fact, I'm not following the rationale at all, because there's so much there. But I'm also happy to go with that recommendation 3 following recommendation 2 as it is.
Can I just ask the CEO to read out what you wrote in terms of recommendation 3?
Through the Mayor. So it was in line with recommendation 1, 2, and then addition of 3, that the design directions explore options for reducing the overall costs of the Arts and Cultural Centre to below $20 million, that this can include design options, staging of construction, etc.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Henderson?
Yes, I am, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor. But as I said, I'm more interested in hearing what the, as a start off for sure. But I'm be very interested to hear what members have to say.
Thank you.
So just speaking,
Councillor, so I've just asked. I'd just ask if you'd like to speak to that motion and including the point 3.
Yes, I do, Mayor.
Thank you.
I think it's been a great effort. I have tried to read everything of the nearly 100 pages of the feedback we got from the engagement. Clearly, full steam ahead from a couple of hundred in a process like this is really a lot of people inside the community, and a great job done by the architect in terms of looking at what could be done and what can't be done, and also the staff in writing it up. It's a very very comprehensive document, but I am concerned at this stage that we keep within our budget of the design costs, and we contain the budget to something that we feel is realistic. There's a great deal in this report, which is really excellent in terms of guidelines on that. But I think that it's behoven on us as a chamber to lay down clear guidelines to the administration, but particularly to the architects, as to where and how we move forward in the next steps process, which I'm very pleased to see the timeline is also very acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Henderson, would you like to speak to the motion on block, the recommendations rather, on block?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councillor Robertson. The amount of feedback was pretty amazing, over and above what we would normally receive in terms of numbers. The other thing about the feedback was that it was overwhelmingly positive for the development of an arts and culture centre. And obviously it's something that many in our community think is worthwhile. It's what they've been asking for, it's what they've been looking forward to, and it's very pleasing to see that people are engaging with the proposal. And I think that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Does any other members want to ask any questions or have any comments in relation to the recommendations? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I do have a question. Just to refresh my memory, please. What was the initial cost for the design work? Around 100,000 budget we set aside for RARM to actually do the designs?
Through the Mayor, yes, it was for concept designs, and that was a portion of that has been whipped over to the 21-22 financial year because it's not yet complete. But it's a total of $100,000 for all of the consultation and the concept design work.
So the additional 47,000 is part of the original
Correct.
budget?
Correct.
Oh, thank you. That's why I wasn't quite sure the way it read.
Yeah.
At this stage, when we're looking at this proposal of going ahead with attachment B, when you look at the items in there, there's a very small percentage of people responding to the additional changes in designs as part of this extra 47,000 for this financial year. So to me, it's not a big number to go back and keep redesigning things. The biggest one was the facade at the front, the sculpture as the entrance piece. There's 36% of respondents didn't like it. So that is not a big number. The rest of them are below 7% or 15% on the other issues. And the other one's about public toilets and drop-off points. It's something to do with the Stage 5 Coral Street upgrade, nothing to do with toilets per se in that respect. So I think really we don't need to go and keep redesigning things, because even though we had a large number of people responding, which is fantastic, but the actual areas that we're going to be looking at redesigning is a very small number at all. So I think the majority of people are quite happy with what we've designed and what we've put in there. The disability issues, I think, needs to be addressed with some areas around accessibility. But apart from that, I don't think we need to do much more in the design. So I'm quite happy to see that part of it stay as it is, with a little bit of minor amendments, which wouldn't cost 47,000 to complete. So at this stage, yeah, so I think we just got to keep that in mind when we vote for it. So I most really won't be supporting this motion, because attachment B doesn't really cover much at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Are there any further comments or debate in relation to the recommendations? Thank you, Councillor Charles.
Yeah, thank you for that. I too would like to hear more, and I think this is an occasion where we really could do another workshop on this, because there's so much more to be gone over. It may appear to be a great response from the public. I counted 251 pages, 251 out of chasing people all over Adelaide and Victor Harbour. Opportunity after opportunity is not very many. 118 said yes, 67 said no, 45 were unsure. And these are points that I'm making on whether they would be prepared to pay extra in their rates, and 21 didn't answer at all. But they weren't even given an idea of how much extra rates they may pay. People might want to join in if they knew exactly what it would be, but there was 118 people said, yeah, we'll pay more for it, no problem at all. So that's all right. And the last time we did a consultation back with the original idea of using the town hall and the library, some 13,100 beautiful cards went out to people, and they had the opportunity. Here's one right here. 13,100 went out of 14,000 printed. Can you see that? I don't know whether you can. And there was a tear-off section here where they could just mail it straight back, but people didn't really bother too much. It caused 1,000.
Councillor Charles, I love your passion about this and your past, but if you could please keep to the recommendation and focus on what's happening now and the current public consultation. Thank you.
I'm just stating that this wondrous amount of people that we've got is not the case. There's a lot of passion one way or another, and yes, some people have been confused with the development across the road in Grosvenor Gardens to a degree. They've confused some of the things, but there's only a small number of people who bothered to do more than just ticking a box. There's a very small number of people who wrote their feelings down and made it very, very clear how they felt, and even they are mixed. So my point is that steps at this stage, I think we need to go over it again, be a little bit more thorough. I think that Councillor Andrews, Councillor Robertson is on the right track. He wants to hear from some other people, the silent majority that we've got in this council, to make a comment rather than just rubber stamping everything that comes through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charles, and I'm sure that the council that we have here doesn't rubber stamp everything. We have some fantastic debates. Councillor Littley, Councillor, sorry, don't interrupt me, please, Councillor Charles. Councillor Littley, you're speaking next, and Councillor Robertson, I'll wait until the others have spoken and then you can close the debate. Councillor Littley and then Councillor Glasbrook.
Happy to speak. I wouldn't like to be part of a silent minority or majority, whatever that may be. I don't think I am. I have flagged in throughout our budget workshops and the like that I am not in particular support of spending more or allocating more funds from our budgets towards the Arts and Cultural Centre at this point in time. I'm most certainly not against the concept of the Arts and Culture Centre. I do think that it would be nice to tie off the ends of this finalising concept designs and tidy that up and have that there ready to go. So I'm a little bit torn on that. I can't agree for a second that the consultation is not a, what we've received here from the community consultation is anything but an exceptional response from our community and vastly. Over 200 responses to any community consultation, no matter what's put down there. And it doesn't make a difference whether someone's ticked a box or written out their thoughts. That's not how community consultation works. This is a representative of people who have said to us, responding to the questions we've given them and responding to the consultation that's gone out. So I think it is valuable and we should respect that. I'm probably going to wait to see how people vote, to be honest, and make my decision there, because I'd like to see how it is. I'd like to hear the rest of people. Like, we don't have a silent majority here. We do have great input from all of our elected members when we can get a word in. And I think that I'd like to hear if any others have. I think others have put their hands up to speak, and that might determine just which way I go, because I don't believe that $47,000 is a great deal of money to spend to just put a line in the sand. I do want to see that line in the sand drawn though at this point in time, and that's where I'm going to be deliberating over what way I go with my vote. So convince me one way or the other.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Councillor Glasbrook.
Thank you. So can I just confirm, is number 3 as Victoria's recommendation, is that included in this recommendation now? I've missed that a little bit, sorry.
Yes, it is. 1, 2 and 3.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm happy that 3 is in there. Although I would be happy to, if this didn't go through tonight and we stood back and had another look at it, I'm very much in favour. A lot of people say that I'm not in favour of the Arts and Cultural Centre, but I certainly am in favour of an Arts and Cultural Centre. But I'm not in favour of a $24.5 million one. And I'm quite sure that if we go back to these people and you know, renegotiate, we could come up with a very, very good facility that would meet the needs of our community for significantly less than that, and probably even less than $20 million. That I think we need to try and leave the actual footprint of the cinema as it is. Proposal that these you know, consultants have come up with knocking walls down and reconstructing walls. It have to be extremely expensive on a heritage building like that, and I think the gain would be minimal spending. So, you know, I'm a bit like everyone else. I'm happy to wait. I'm happy to plan around the budget that we want to spend, and I'll just go on from where we sort of left off yesterday in relation to the process. Hopefully we've got a process coming up to how we can determine grants for our local sporting community, for example. So I really believe we need a way to construct this type of endeavour into the future. Council need to give these architects and these people a budget right from word go. We need to say that we want to spend, you know, X number of dollars. What can we get for that? If they come back to us and they say, well, you can't get anything for that, well, then we realise that we need to spend a little bit more money. What we've done in this case, and what we seem to do in every case, is just go out to these consultants and say, here, we've got this town hall, we've got this cinema, what can you do? And of course, all of these consultants and architects, they all compete against each other, and they want to have the best building in the state and in the country, and they build a thing that's very, very nice to have, but probably unaffordable. So I'm just getting back to, I think the process that we undertake again is flawed, and we should change it so that it doesn't happen anymore. So I'm a bit like Councillor Litley. I'm not quite sure which way to vote. I'm not against it, but I think wouldn't hurt us to take a step backwards and just examine where we're going. That's probably where I think we are.
Victoria, would you like to respond to that?
Through the Mayor, just to clarify a couple of the questions or concern that I believe I've heard, and it really goes back to Councillor Kemp's point. The current contract with ARM is a signed contract for completion of a piece of work, and that we are contracted to currently. That was money already budgeted for, so it's not money. $47,000 is a part of that existing contract, and there are more workshops scheduled with elected members to go back over these designs, and with the inclusion of part 3, and we have already done that in terms of, from the administration perspective, raised with ARM the concerns around the construction costs, reducing those costs, and what elements we can actually look, or what options we can introduce to reducing those costs. So obviously by articulating this in the resolution, it's really clear from council that that is confirmed, but the intention is to have some more workshops and to reduce those costs. And to come back to members to have a further look of consideration of those designs.
Thank you, Victoria. Does anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Schofield?
Yes, I will. Look, I do have my own thoughts and that on most things that put up as recommendations. Because I don't say anything every time doesn't mean to say I don't have a viewpoint, because it would mean that I either agree or disagree, and I don't think a third or fourth or fifth voice saying exactly the same thing is really necessary. In this case, yes, I agree that we need to have some clear guidelines in a lot of things that we do, and that's been brought forward tonight in 2 of the recommendations that have been put forward. I'd like to see this completed. I will be voting for it.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Councillor Hales, do you want to speak to this? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I think with this recommendation where it's at, I definitely had some questions about it heading into this meeting, but I think what has been great is the questions, I guess, or queries that came out of Councillor Robertson's alternate viewpoint that he sent through Victoria, and the recommendation 3 that Victoria was able to craft to add into this motion, which I think provides a really good outcome in terms of looking at those things that possibly are still questions in our heads, especially around some of the material we've workshopped. And so I think it's a really good example of elected members working with staff pre-meeting to get some of this stuff on the table to make sure that we're delivering good outcomes from council meetings. With that recommendation 3 in there, I'm more than happy to vote for this. I think, yeah, number 1's a given. 2 is, yeah, as Victoria outlined, we've signed up to a process already in terms of the architect, and 3 kind of brings in that elected member voice a bit more. So happy to vote for this recommendation and look forward to future workshops around this.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Councillor Mann?
Just to add, I think, to the discussion that's been had, I think that, the motion that's been put up, and I thank Councillor Robertson for his work, I guess, trying to push us forward in the right direction on this, and I thank the CEO as well, because I think that now the recommendations sort of hit sort of more in line with that community recommendations. There were a lot of feedback about the facade, and I think it's appropriate for us to make a recommendation more specific to that as well, in covering that. one of them was around whether it was, if the rock was painted yellow, it might look like a piece of cheese. And I think, there are all these great viewpoints from the community, but I think that also one of the things that came through clearly was the capital expenditure that the community were concerned about. And there was a lot of incredibly informed viewpoints around that as well, which I found excellent. And I think that through this sort of further discussion and also through things like the workshop we had previously, and then looking at the staging options and also this third recommendation, I think that's more in line with what the community is asking us to consider. And I think this shows that we are responding to their feedback and still progressing the project, but are being more realistic about the costings, the timeframes, and our other big capital expenditures that we're looking to do in the future. So I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. I think that's everybody. Councillor Robertson, would you like to close the debate? Oh, Councillor Kemp, you have spoken, haven't you? Yes, you spoke first. Councillor Robertson, would you like to close the debate?
Thank you, Mayor. Could I ask a question first, please?
Certainly.
It's a little bit off the beam, but directly off this. But I was just thinking, in terms of moving forward, the architects and ourselves as well. Could I ask the CEO, have we sort of lined up, or are we applying for any grants for this? Is it just too early to do that? There aren't the right kind of grant funding available for application for? How are we travelling with in terms of grants?
Victoria?
Through the Mayor, no, we are not applying for any grants. We're certainly not in a position to. I'd be seeking, we would be waiting till we're at a stage where we had probably detailed designs and full support of council in terms of a provision in our long-term financial plan. We're nowhere near that as yet.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be happy to close the debate, Mayor. Thank you all, elected members, councillors, colleagues, for giving your views. I certainly appreciated them. Thank you, Victoria, for your inputs on that. I think we've put some markers on the ground about what we'd like to see in terms of giving solid, clear guidance to the architects and to the administration about where we like to head. And I look forward to the workshops that are coming up. Can't come quick enough for me. And I say I appreciate the reticence of some, or not reticence, perhaps their hesitation of some members to not vote for this because maybe not yet being clear, but I'm happy enough with the next steps program in terms of what we're going to be doing, and looking forward to contributing to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. That closes the debate on that matter. And we have 3 recommendations. Does everybody clear on all 3 of them? Okay, I'll put them to the floor. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. We now move to item 10.4, the Environment and Food Production Area Review. The recommendation, I will do that en bloc again. Council receiving a note, the review report, and the second recommendation that Council providing a submission on the Environment and Food Production Area Review as per the conclusion section within the report. Would somebody like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Littley. And seconded by Councillor Henderson. Would either of you like to speak to that? Councillor Littley, no. Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak to that? Yep.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just very briefly, I did attend the workshop that was held in the council chambers on this, planning, and it's clear that the overlays used, as you might expect, are very broad and very general, and it because of that, it's only logical that when you come down to the fine detail of where the edges of those borders are, that things are not quite as they should be. And given those areas where changes need to be made in our own council area, our urban area, as opposed to our food production area, there are some areas where that doesn't quite overlay the way it should. So we need to make these submissions to make that clearer.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to contribute to the debate? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor. I would. The only thing I have to say about this particular set of recommendations is that what an excellent effort. What a great it is to read a report that's as well constructed as this, and particularly to Mr. David Reid and his team about the submission, because the council is going to provide a submission, and I bet that it'll be the best that there is in the state too, with regard to the code anomalies, which start on the bottom of page 173 and halfway through 174. It's really important work that's been done by our staff in terms of highlighting deficiencies in this process to the planning authority, and so to me, very well done.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to contribute? Councillor Little, do you want to close debate at all? I'll then put this motion on block, or the recommendation on block rather, to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried, thank you. Item 10.5 is the Main Street Stage 5 community engagement. That recommendation again I will do on block, given the first one is receiving and noting the report, and the second one is the council noting the outstanding issues list as tabled within the report, and proceed with investigating resolutions and refining the design options to be presented to the council for consideration. Would somebody like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And seconding that? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Would either of you like to speak to that? Councillor Schofield?
Yes, I will. I guess out of all of our Main Street upgrades, this is the one that concerns me the most with the Grosvenor Gardens, and I think we really need to look a lot more carefully. The cost factor, I mean, yeah, I have some huge concerns like a lot of the other residents do. So yes, I'd like to have a look at a refined design option.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I agree. We need to gain this information, see what the new concept designs would look like, with some costings to it. But again, you know, the community has spoken. Some community members don't want any change, and because that's an interesting thing, because some of the car parking requires changes because they're not up to standard. Certainly ones on Torrens Street will be bursting out on. But again, I'd like to wait and see what comes out of this final process to see what it really actually looks like and how the designers take on board the residents' comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Little?
Yeah, my concerns, I have a few concerns there around going out to public consultation with the outstanding issues as they sit at the moment. I might be missing it, but I don't see anywhere there, and it might not be needed because there isn't a change, but things like the Biddystock Memorial Trough being retained in its position. I know that there's not, the concept doesn't do that, but I think we need to be going out for consultation. We've got a bit of work to do, a bit of ground to make up to assure our community that that isn't a proposed move, I think, because we've gone down a long path there. There's also not in the outstanding issues anything which I thought in our discussion the other day was made fairly clear about losing any parts and making sure that we retain parts, be it in the side street there, Sturt, whatever one it's called. Sorry, I get mixed up because I lived in Alice Springs and also in the Barossa. And there's a Sturt Highway and a Sturt Highway. Stewart Street, I'm pretty sure it is. But I think that some more really defining what those around those points would be more satisfactory for me. I also wonder and tend to side with Councillor Kemp's comment there. If we don't do anything here, do we lose car parks? Are we able to continue to reverse out onto Torrens Street there? Because it's my vague recollection and sort of minimal understanding of we don't need, we're compliant with car parks as they stand, but if we change, we redeveloped, then we have to meet those Australian standards. I don't know that that's the right thing to do. From a legal perspective, is retain non-compliant car parks, but if we don't change, do we really have a need to change that? So there's some of the considerations I have. I'm not opposed to the stage 5 development. I think that in keeping with the rest of Main Street, the Central Business District upgrade, I think it's something that we can do. I do think though that this is minimal treatment on this section is the preference of the community, and it would be my preference.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Before we move on, I'll just respond to a couple of the queries that you had there. If you have a look on page 220, it says the amended draft concept plans as presented in attachment D have been altered in response to feedback, with amendments summarised below. One of those amendments is increase in the allocation of car parking spaces. You'll see that's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th dot point. And the last 2 dot points, the Betty Horse Trough Memorial remains in its current location and is enhanced, and the vehicle access considered in Grosvenor Gardens for events, festivals and maintenance. So that list may address some of the concerns that you raised. Councillor Mann, was that you?
Just a quick response to that, because it will sit better with me. No doubt that list, are you there? Sorry.
Yes,
no
yes.
That list would be somewhere in that
I'll
consultation. Am I correct in saying that? Would that go out in the consultation?
I'll let the CEO respond to that, Brian.
Sorry, Councillor Littley. This item has already been out for consultation. This is the feedback from that consultation that's already been conducted. So it's not anticipated to do any more consultation at this stage. We need to explore all the consultation that's been received and bring the design options back to the chamber.
Sorry, my wording's incorrect there. That's this is when our community reads the way we've consumed that consultation, and when we're feeding back to the community, I find that the likes of future design direction won't capture and be considerable answering when we've got a highlight their outstanding issues, because in my mind, from what I've seen in the community, as far as feedback outside of the consultation feedback, but in and around on social media and things like that, they still believe that an outstanding issue is the Bessie Stock trough.
And that's something
where I'm coming from, is that we need to make it very clear that putting it in the outstanding issues and in the future design directions would be a preference for me when we're communicating that back, how we've handled this back to the community, how we've received it as a council, their feedback, that we are very, very clear on what they want with regards to a couple of those points.
Absolutely, Councillor Littley. I think that's important to communicate that back to the community. Councillor Mann, you wanted to speak? Sorry, Councillor Mann, you're very difficult to hear. Can you speak closer?
I sure can.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, firstly, I just want to thank administration for their work in getting all of this feedback and consultation. And I know that there is a lot of work that goes into getting all of these submissions, and it is excellent feedback again. And it's very helpful, I think, from an elected member's point of view. I guess what I'm able to draw out from this consultation is similar to some of the discussions we had at the workshop the other night around the priorities of some of our bigger projects. And I think that whilst the upgrade of the main street has been incredibly successful and important, I think stage 5 is probably more at the lesser end of importance of the whole development. And what this engagement has shown us with the community is that there are a lot of issues, there are a lot of disagreements, there's a lot of things that people want to stay the same about the site. And I guess, you know, it is a site that we eventually will improve to make it more in line with the rest of the development. And the changes might not be as large as other sites, but I think that what's come through is that people are wanting more car parking, which feeds into our desire for, you know, our McKinley Street car park, another bigger project, which again, I would say more important than this one. And I think where stage 5 stacks up in terms of some of our bigger projects that are coming in the future, I think this one is defeated by them and maybe needs to be pushed back a little bit longer, because I don't think that the rewards outweigh the costs when compared to the other significant community projects that we're looking at. And I think I can read that within the consultation as well, relating to this one. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Is there any for Councillor Robertson? Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I won't be voting for this, and the reason is that an excellent job, fantastic feedback from the community on the design of this change to this park, and and unlike the Arts and Culture Centre, where there was, you know, quite a lot of positive comment, many of the issues in this Grosvenor Park excited, you know, roughly equal yeses and nos, and quite strident yeses and nos. It's very difficult to decide, you know, what would be left. But to me, there's no need to rake over the coals in this. The architects have done a good enough job. The latest version that they have is something to think about for the future. This particular development won't take place for a few years. The key elements of what's come out of this process to me is that are really two things. One is the need to change that dreadful pedestrian crossing that's runs into KFC's park, put it where it should have been from the very beginning, and that is and that is coming out of the other side of the entrance road to the central Victor. And I think there was virtually no one objected to that, and everyone was cheering. And that could even be something that we might consider doing as part of our asset renewal or whatever in the next few years. Kind of get in and do a couple of things out of this consultation process, and that would be one of those. The rest, to me, the community spoken as of 2021. We've got a lot of rich material out of what's in here. I think put the design efforts of the consultants into deep freeze. We'll get them out again, and this project's not going to go away, but it's not on the horizon to be of great importance for the near future. The only other issue that might be something that the council might independently do as part of is that when the Arts and Culture Centre is produced, yes, there is a desperate need for public toilets everywhere in Victor, but taking away the one that's at the side of the town hall at present does need to be replaced. It does make sense for it to be on the Grosvenor Park. So a small public toilet to be put in there. But to me, we've done enough on this one. I think it's, and the CEO may not agree, but I think it's it's 95% shovel ready. And if we choose to put it on the asset management plan and into the next few years of budgets, then we can just trot all this good material out and then bingo, make some decisions. But we're not going to get very far, I don't think, by addressing the outstanding issues list there. It's just.
Councillor Robertson, sorry, you've got 1 minute to go. If you want to extend your time, the other elected members may give you that permission. Yep, okay, fine.
In summary, Mayor, it would just be that this is a great job, very well done by the administration. A lot of really good lessons learned. We can now put this one to bed. It's 95% ready. Bring it out when we're ready for action on it, and don't do any more work on it. Then, so that's my opinion.
Thank you. I think the CEO would like to respond to a couple of points that you've made. Victoria.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Just obviously, just to remind members, again, the council, I think it was 2 years ago, actually engaged Oxygen by way of a contract, and we're still in that existing contract, to undertake the designs, and that's concept and detailed designs for stages 4 to 6 of our main street, and that was so that we had them in a position where they were shovel ready. So it's not completed, and we are in an existing contract, so it's no additional funds. We need to complete the works that we've engaged a contractor to undertake. And it may well be that once this is complete, those designs are complete for stage 5 to the expectations of the council and its community, then we may be able to take elements of it out and undertake them as part of our asset renewal parts. But it would be in part of a consistent master plan or key project, and not doing it bits and pieces that aren't a part of a greater a vision for that particular area. So stages 5 and 6 are still to be completed as part of the current contract with Oxygen. Thank you,
Victoria. So can I just confirm that contract's been paid, and we're under contract to do that work? Yep. Okay. Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to the motion? Councillor Henderson. And welcome back, Councillor Glasbrook. I understand that your Zoom froze, so glad you got back in. Councillor Henderson, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Overall, the community feedback seemed to be happy with the general concept of the way that people will move through the space with the alterations proposed. And again, I think it was a very worthwhile community engagement. We got a lot of feedback. Yes, there are some things that our community members are not happy with. The thing is, if we don't move this recommendation to look at the outstanding issues and investigate resolutions at this point in time, that feedback will just sit there. I think we owe it to the community to investigate those resolutions at this point in time, while we've just had the engagement with the community, so the community can see that we're actually acting on that feedback. And that's what this recommendation is doing. It's acting on the feedback from that community consultation. So if we don't move this recommendation, I fear it might say to our community, well, thank you for your feedback, but we're just going to put it all on hold. Go away and we'll come back to you sometime in the future. I think we owe it to the community to act on this now. And if we choose to have project move more slowly after that point because of budget priorities, all well and good. But I think we need to move this recommendation because of the engagement we've just carried out.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And I think from what the CEO has said, and also what you have all said, It sounds like we can, if the recommendation is carried, go through and look at the outstanding issues list, try and fix or come to some sort of resolution and refined design in relation to the outstanding issues, because as the CEO said, we've paid for and Oxygen is still doing the designs, so they can refine the designs in relation to the outstanding issues. Then when it's shovel ready, we can put it on hold until there is a time that is appropriate, and the council of the day, if it's not this council, want to proceed with it. That's the picture that I'm getting. Councillor Mann, did you have your hand up? No, Councillor Glasbrook did. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I missed a lot of that debate, but I do agree with what Councillor Henderson just said, as well as yourself, that I think we probably should finalise this design. But I have to say that I'm not probably in favour of going ahead with the actual work at this stage, because I believe we've got some far greater priorities. But we've sort of gone down this track, so probably once at least we've got a general design completed.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. You look like you wanted to say something, Victoria?
Yeah, through the Mayor, obviously based on our discussions, I think it was a week ago, seems like a long time ago, in terms of long-term financial planning, in terms of construction, this is certainly way out in the 10-year long-term financial plan. That was made very clear, but I also think it's very important that we complete this design work.
Thank you. Are there any Councillor Charles and then Councillor Hales?
Thank you for that. I don't think the yeah, okay, I know I'm supposed to speak to this, and I am going to speak to this, but there are some points I'd like to make. Coral Street entry is another very important gateway to the town, to the main street and to the heart of the city. So it needs some sort of treatment there as far as I'm concerned. As I've mentioned in other meetings that we've had, we can attend to the Stewart Street, Coral Street intersection and make that safer without taking a whole lot of swag of work done in Grosvenor Gardens. The biggest issue that we've got is that we're waiting or have to do yet another traffic study for Torrens Street, because that is the issue, not the easy movement through the park. The problem is getting across the road. And it's all very well, a number of people said, no, we're not having, or two people said, I should say, that they thought the moving of the pedestrian crossing to the new position, where it should have been in the first place, is going to make it very difficult for traffic to come across and enter when the lights change. So they're going to do a loop around the roundabout. So that's the problem there. I think some traffic lights, and somebody else mentioned traffic lights at the intersection would get people across better. We've got traffic snarls like you wouldn't believe. We all know that. And the traffic moving in a southerly direction would be have difficulty. I think I might just leave it at that, because I can see that every member has 5 minutes to speak if they want to use it or not. So there's no excuses for not being able to when you say, well, if only we had the opportunity. I think that's bullying.
If we, I'm not sure that that's what would be called bullying, Councillor Charles. And I do try and give you all some leeway in terms of meeting procedures, and we all need to work together. So what I'd do is I'd really ask people to debate the specific motions and not get into personal attacks or labelling or derogatory things. We're working really well in today's meeting, and I'd really like to keep it at that. Councillor Hales, you wanted to speak?
Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I'm going to reiterate a lot of what was said by fellow action members in terms of, I think with this particular project, we've seen that the community generally think that Grosvenor Gardens have good bones, could use a bit of a facelift, a bit of a touch-up here and there, but by and large, they don't want the structure of this reserve changed. Almost 2/3 of them said, don't touch the rotunda. So we should probably just not touch the rotunda. Keep it maintained. maybe give it another access point to make it more usable, but leave it where it is, what they've said. I think, yeah, the reserve could do with some upgrades at the tail end of our 10-year capital works plan, just to make sure that it stays up to date and remains in line with the rest of the Main Street precinct. But I don't think it needs any structural changes, and therefore we should be putting what's left of this design work towards making sure we're doing some minor things. Maybe moving the crossing is probably the biggest structural change, but the rest of it doesn't need anything too fancy done to it. So that's certainly where I'll be heading, but happy to vote for this motion, given that it's contract and a load of work that we've already signed up to. We should get it done, put it on the shelf.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Councillor Schofield, unless there's anybody else that hasn't spoken, I think everybody has. Would you like to close the debate?
Thank you. Look, I believe that we really do need to complete this to meet our obligations, and I also agree strongly with Councillors Henderson, Councillor Gladesbrook and Councillor Hales. I won't repeat what their thoughts are because they are mine as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. I'll now put that recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Um, 12.1, the Warland Reserve Turf Trial Outcomes. The first recommendation is that Council receive and note the report. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales, and seconding Councillor Littley. Either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? No. Anybody want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor, I presume that the other elected members have seen my correspondence with Director Hayter about this report. I don't think it should have come to the chamber in its present format. I think it's a very poor quality report, and to me, I would not like to see it on our minutes. And I think the content, my objections to it, laid out clearly in that correspondence.
Any further discussion on receiving and noting the report? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The second recommendation is that Council endorse the ongoing use of Kikuyu turf in Warland Reserve, noting that a complete turf replacement in Warland Reserve to move that way. Thank you, Councillor Littley, and seconding Councillor Henderson. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Littley? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't agree with Councillor Robertson with regards to the contents of the report. I'm fairly familiar with the TIFTUF stuff, and those people that I read through Councillor Robertson's communications with regards to his objection to the report. That's his view. I see that the work's been done here. You know, I am a big fan of that hybrid TIFTUF stuff. I've seen it work. I know the guy that's growing. I know him quite well, and I wish him all the best. But I see that we've tried it here. The effort's been put in. It isn't to purpose. It isn't as good as the Kikuyu in all circumstances. Unfortunately, for that, I don't think that spending a great deal of money to change it across Warland Reserve is required, and I'd rather see that money going into the irrigation upgrade, or I guess that's going to happen anyway. It's a budget allocation for the irrigation upgrade. I had one question with regards to the irrigation upgrade, and that was, does that, I'll say it now and then I won't say it in item number 3. Does that irrigation upgrade tap into our stored water from Railway Terrace? Is that part of the irrigation upgrade. I understand that the pipe work needs to be upgraded in any case, but is there some of that cost linking into the water?
I believe it does, Councillor Littley, but I'll let Kathy Hayter explain further. Kathy?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, yes, Councillor Lidley, you're right. It is to tap into the stored water, and it is also to take to allow the scheme to be extended, so the recycled water that currently goes to Soldiers Memorial can also be used on Wallen Reserve.
Thank you for that. That was my understanding.
Sorry, Brian. I gave you a bit of leeway to ask the question about the stormwater, but perhaps if we wait till recommendation 3 when we're talking about the irrigation upgrade, if we can just keep it to the turf at the moment. Thank you.
That is fine, but that my comment is actually in relation to the turf.
Okay.
In relation to the irrigation, because we've got an asset in stormwater being held there that we've created across the time period that we've actually been doing this type turf trial. And I think that shifts that adds weight to the Kaikoura argument, that we've actually made an investment in an asset, being the water asset, to be able to get the most out of our Kaikoura, because we're able to therefore water that Kaikoura and maintain it in a way that anyone who knows Kaikoura, you put some water on it, it will green up and it'll stay green throughout. So I think we've maybe done a disservice to the TIFTA because we've created another asset that's going to help in the growth and the suitability of the Kaikoura turf that we had there, getting it back.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Councillor Henderson, did you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have read the report in quite great detail, and I'm very happy with it. I've also seen Councillor Robertson's questions about the report to Director Hedger and seen the replies. I'm very well satisfied with the replies to Councillor Robertson's questions, and quite happy to go ahead with the Kaikoura turf.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Councillor Robertson, you had your hand up.
Yes, Mayor, I thought we were going to miss out on the opportunity to make inputs into this recommendation, which I'd like to do now. Is that okay?
With the mover and the seconder, you can vary the recommendation if both of them are happy with that. What?
No, you didn't give us the opportunity after you talked to the mover and seconder. You didn't give the opportunity. I was waiting for it, for other elected members to speak about the recommendation.
That's what I'm doing now.
Okay, so may I speak to it?
Absolutely. Councillor Littley spoke to it. He moved it. Councillor Henderson spoke to it. You put your hand up to speak to it, and I said, Councillor Robertson, what would you like to say? Please speak.
Okay. I think, okay. I'm really disappointed that this recommendation is here, because if you vote for this, what you're voting for is an inferior quality grass being used on your premier, nature or lawn reserve in this town. The Kaikoura is, in terms of the environmental objectives of this council, which is to
please put the motion, because I'm asking that we put the motion because we've had expert opinion on this, and I'm not convinced that Councillor Robertson is a lawn expert giving us advice about inferior lawn products.
Is there a seconder to putting the motion? Councillor Henderson seconds putting the motion. If we can. I beg your pardon, you are quite right, Councillor Hales. Councillor Littley, you moved the motion, so you're unable to put the motion. Carry on, Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, if you agree with this tonight, what you're saying is that a complete turf replacement on Wallen Reserve is not required. This is your future premier lawned area in this town. And ongoing use of Kikuyu is going to mean excessive amounts of water to be able to keep this grass going. It doesn't respond very well at all in wintertime. And yes, you know, maybe Councillor Littley might be an expert on turf, but the authors of this report are not experts on turf. I'm sorry. The experts on turf have said that, you know, no council in their right mind in this day and age in premier locations in their town would use Kikuyu over new varieties that have been specifically developed to use less water, to be more environmentally sustainable, to be able to take tougher treatment of foot traffic, wheel traffic, etc. So if you pass this this particular recommendation, what you're doing is going against your own environmental management policy. You are also, you know, you're going backwards. You're not moving to the future in terms of the way in which we should be designing the facilities we have with the latest technology we have available to us. So to me, it is it's a flawed trial, a deeply flawed trial that led to this recommendation. And you're following that deeply flawed trial, and you are also not following your own environmental management recommendations. The water that's in the tank at the runoff from Railway Reserve is going to have a myriad of uses, and not just to be watering of Warland Reserve. There's a great deal of the rest of the area around about that point of land in Victor that needs to be watering, and the tank in there is not going to be enough. We already know that the problems we have in the town with regard to stored water and recycled water, it's at maximum use, and we need more of it. So to think that we've got some idle bit of water sitting and that won't have any other use than to water Kikuyu is absolute nonsense. So anyway, that's my bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I might ask Kathy Hayter before we move on to the next person, just to clarify some of the issues that you have raised. Kathy, would you be able to perhaps explain the trial? Councillor Robertson appears to think it's flawed, and I'd just like to know a little bit more about the trial and also the staff that actually carried out the trial in terms of their ability to work with law and their professionalism in relation to that. Could you please outline those things for the elected members?
Thank you. Through the Mayor. So just a couple of things then. The trial, the 3 different species that were included in the trial. So the Kikuyu patches were laid between the 2 other species, the tiftuff and the zoysia. And so it was new Kikuyu that was laid, so that there was no doubt that they all had to establish the same. The breeders or the suppliers' directions were followed in terms of the watering regime, in terms of the application of fertiliser that was applied. There was initially a chemical fertiliser applied. The team did that for quite a while, but then determined, as with all of our parks, we prefer to use organic fertiliser, so they switched to that organic fertiliser. They have taken photos during that period. The grasses, those turf trial patches were laid where they knew there would be traffic. Obviously, over the period of COVID, there was some different levels of traffic, and so the trial has gone on for longer than first anticipated. Team that's looked at, and one thing I would say is the team did acknowledge that tiftuff does have potential, and but at the end of the day, they didn't feel that was significantly more than the Kikuyu to warrant the cost and the downtime in replacing it. The people that undertook the trial, our team is headed by a qualified horticulturalist and the gardeners that look after all of our reserves. The photos, they have taken photos over the period of the grasses through different seasons to see what how they've taken. So essentially, although I take the point about tiftuff has potential, and it has been, as Councillor Robertson has highlighted, played in many other places, including Port Augusta. The Port Augusta conditions and weather obviously are different to what Victor Harbour is. So yes, it does have potential for future use in Victor Harbour, but whether it's significantly more than what the existing Kaikoura is to warrant it being changed, we don't agree on.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Does anybody else want to speak on the recommendation 2? Councillor Schofield.
Thank you. Look, I don't have any issues with the report. The Kaikoura is like any other grass, depending on the climatic conditions and also the soil, is how successful that planting is going to be. Kai also has a resistant to many water qualities and will take a higher level of salinity to other grasses. So I guess one of the things Kai doesn't like across all of them is frost. And I don't believe that Woorleen Reserve would get the amount of frosts that Inman Valley and Back Valley have. So I don't see an issue with that report.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Councillor Little, you'll be closing debate, so I'll just see if there's anybody else that wants to speak. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. It's an interesting recommendation, considering that there's no alternative choices whether we choose one of the 3 in the trial. Let's just stick with it. So actually, if we remove the recommendation, we stay with Kaikoura anyway, because we've not got another decision to make whether we choose another grass. So for me, it's, sticking with that one, that recommendation really doesn't achieve anything, because we're going to stay, we're not choosing anything else, so we've got Kaikoura as a fallback position. So I'm not really supporting it, because it doesn't, to me, it's not actually doing anything. And plus at this stage, it locks us into Kaikoura for the future without having to rescind this motion sometime in the future if we decide to change to a different grass. So, you know, I guess the only thing you could do to make this look a little bit better is to say that at the end of the recommendation, if the mover is going to say at this stage, leaves it open to change if we wanted to in the future. If not, we keep with what we got. But locking it in like this, we have to rescind it if we want to change to something new. Whenever. So I just think it's just a superfluous recommendation which wasn't necessary. So I won't be supporting it.
Are there any further discussions? Otherwise, I'll ask Councillor Little to close the debate. Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I have some similar thoughts to what Councillor Kemp has just expressed in terms of actively choosing to continue on with the same thing as you're currently doing is a choice that doesn't need to be made because of the status quo. And I do think that while this report does suggest that we should continue with the Kaikoura, I do think that down the path in the future, especially given the fact that we have certainly flagged the potential to master plan Woorleen Reserve and the like and alter it in kind of the 10 to 15 year mark, that would be a perfect time if we were to change grass varieties to make the switch, if we were changing the infrastructure there anyway. But I do support the motion as it stands, even though, as Councillor Kemp has highlighted for us, it's not entirely necessary, and I agree more, but I'll be supporting it anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I'd have to disagree with Councillor Hales and Kemp around that. I don't think that, I think in the past status quo decisions, there's probably been a reason for us not to have done them, but I think in this instance, I think if administration hadn't have brought this decision back to council, then elected members would have definitely kicked up a fuss around that. Whilst the motion that's gone up is around the Kaikoura that we're going to go with, I think that it could have, another motion could have gone the other way in putting up one of the other grasses, and this is sort of the conclusion of that trial. So I don't agree with that statement about this being not required. In terms of Councillor Robertson raised some really good points, which I guess I'll have a question at the end as well, but around, I guess, you know, the balance of the cost of putting in this new turf for what that next benefit is. I do appreciate that there are benefits to the TIF turf hybrid, and I think that, and I appreciate your point, Councillor Robertson, but I think also, and my question will be around the cost of putting and laying down the new turf. I couldn't see that in the recommendation, but I think from what we have in this report and the questions that you've answered, and I thank you, Councillor Robertson, for forwarding on those questions, and I think administration for answering them prior to the meeting. I think that was really helpful as well in the discussion. I thank Councillor Robertson for how he conducted that. But yeah, I think I am in favour of this motion. I think whilst there is that potential for the new turf, I think with the period that the Kaikuu's had now to, without events, to really grow and just have that rest time, I think it's not a good time for us to be removing it. Maybe it is something for a future council who has less big cost burdens and who are less, what's the word I'm looking for, who aren't as concerned about bringing the budget down and not approving budgets as our council is. I think, you know, I think that's a consideration that plays into part with whether we want to spend this extra money. So I think at the moment I'm happy to support the ongoing use. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Litterly, would you like to close the debate?
Yeah, first of all, I must apologise to Councillor Robertson for interjecting there with calling for a motion to be put. I actually thought I was the seconder on this motion. I got mixed up between the first recommendation and this one, so apologies, Andrew Robertson. I do know that you're very passionate about this, and I've followed it very closely and heard you speak at depth about this for some time, and I appreciate that work. It is good. I think that the study shows quite clearly, and we've got to back out the experts that have put that study together, that the TIF tough stuff isn't an investment that we should be making. Also, Councillor Kemp, I don't disagree that at this stage could be warranted in there, but it's not there. I do think that we do achieve something from this. We achieve a significant savings right now in committing to replacing all of that turf. We'll stand the test to see if it stands the test of time, whether we get those savings, whether we're impacted with water use and things like that. I don't believe so. And I think that the trial and the recommendations from the people that conducted the trial have covered that off. If we didn't have a recommendation to endorse ongoing use of Kaikoura turf, I'd be questioning why did we do the trial in the first place if we weren't going to endorse something. There could have been TIF tough that was endorsed. It would read the same way, pretty much. Different outcome, we'd spend more money. So hopefully we can move this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Litterly. I'll put the motion to the floor now, and that is recommendation 2. All those in and those against? That's carried, thank you. The third recommendation is that the irrigation project for Wallen and Capital Works program as part of the current view of the asset management plans. Would somebody like to move that way, Councillor Litterly? And seconded by Councillor Henderson. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Litterly?
Yep. Only to say that an upgrade for the irrigation upgrade is required. Hopefully, I'd like to see it done in conjunction with any plan where it's going ahead. I don't want to see irrigation dug up when we do any renovations to Wallen Reserve, but then I also don't want to see a great change to Wallen Reserve. So that's why I'm putting it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Litterly. Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak to this?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Does anybody want to speak to it or have any questions? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I I appreciate from the information given by Director Hayter to me this afternoon. I didn't realise that the replacement of the irrigation upgrade was a lot more extensive than what I imagined with regard to the poly pipe that provides the sprinklers on Warland Reserve, and that those sprinklers are in need of replacement. I sorely appreciate that. But the thing that bothers me about this is that we're going to be doing a complete study of this part of Victor, at least part of Warland Reserve, if not the whole lot of it, and then the other foreshore development fairly soon. So are we then going to be putting in a new system that turns out to be obsolete when it comes to this is not an inconsiderable amount of money that is then going to be not suitable or is going to be a dog tail wagging the dog in terms of design because you're putting in place a system that later on isn't necessary. So to me, I appreciate that some of the piping underground there and the sprinklers themselves are not working, but I wonder if the complete upgrade is really a prudent decision at this point in time when we haven't looked at the totality of the water use for that area and also what is required. Paikuyu itself is a thirsty grass, so there's going to be, they'll suck up a lot, but then there's a lot of other uses for the water that goes around, apart from gardens, etc. And we haven't yet done the necessary work on the design of that area. So, me, yeah, I'm kind of torn. I know that when an asset's done, it's done. You should get on and replace it. Appreciate that, but is it really necessary to replace all of this? And given that we're going to take a more comprehensive look at this particular piece of real estate in the not too distant future, the causeway will be built by the end of the year, and works that are going to go on around that area will need to be tackled at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I might ask Kathy Hayter. Kathy, if you can respond and perhaps answer some of those questions that Councillor Robertson had, that would be great.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. So just a couple of things there to note. Council did originally look at doing a whole master plan for the Warland Reserve area. A couple of things to note there. Council applied for a funding grant through Places for People, but was unsuccessful for that. I think it was the first budget session, Council determined that it wasn't a priority. Remembering when this was initially proposed to do the Warland Reserve master plan, we thought that there'd be quite a bit more upheaval of Warland Reserve as a result of the causeway, which hasn't eventuated. Nonetheless, it still is in the asset management plan, and I think currently it's in around 28, 29.
Thank you, Kathy. Would anybody else like to speak to this? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'm not supporting this motion at this stage, this recommendation, due to the fact that I think we need to be looking at a master plan or a plan of Warland Reserve much sooner than what's been articulated. Whether that incorporated in the foreshore master plan at the same time, but I think we need to, there's a fair bit of money to spend into something which we don't know what the infrastructure will look like when we do a planning process. And I have concerns like Councillor Littley, you don't want to start ripping up irrigation systems because it's in the wrong spot because of our new designs and what we're going to use those areas for. The other reasons why I'm not supporting this one at the moment is that there is a movement within council chambers to reduce capital expenditure, not increase it at this stage. So again, this is an element there. The other one is that, you know, SFC recovering very well. events, maybe we should start not having so many events there. Grass to recover and grow and water it in that area. And we don't need a $200,000 watering system. I think if it does need upgrading, of course, I think we need to be wandering around the fact that let's identify what we want to use that for. Let's protect what we've got at the moment by not overusing it, and maybe protecting certain areas of the reserve at various times. Not allow people to walk across and allow the grass to recover, and then move that around. That happens a lot in large areas around where venues are used a lot. So I think we need to actually plan how we use that reserve before we start spending $200,000, before we know what we want to do with it in the future. So I think, I won't support this at this stage. I think we need to bring planning ahead to ensure that we know what we want that reserve to be and why. Now with the information centre and the Whale Centre has been upgraded into that new building. So I think we need to look at that. And I think then if it's appropriate, then yes, let's put in the new sprinkler system. Once we know what we're going to agree to, we may not change the reserve and put infrastructure in there, but at least have a plan there so we're shovel ready when we want to do it. But the first phase could be done putting a new irrigation system in, because we know where we can put it, because depending on what we've got to place in there in the way of structures or ground facilities. So that's why I'm not supporting it at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to contribute to the debate? If not, I'll ask Councillor Littley to close. Thank you, Councillor Littley.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I know I've moved this, but after hearing what you've said there, I won't be supporting the motion that I've moved. Because it is right that we can go on and, in this case, maintain the status quo and potentially get by, and it would be something that we do need to have a look at Wallen Reserve and what we're doing there. I expressed that I'd like to see very minimal change to Wallen Reserve, and I don't agree with everything you said about having less events in our premier public space, and probably one of the premier public spaces in South Australia, which it is. And that's why I agree with you that we should sit down as a council and start to plan now. 28, 29 is when we start to look at those plans, and that's a long way out for that foreshore area, but we are going to have pressures from the completion of the causeway right upon us, and expectations out in the community to have some idea of what we're doing in that space. I wouldn't like to see us spend $200,000 upgrading an asset without at first having, an idea of what we might like as a collective of councillors. I don't feel that we need to go out to consultation with designers and everything like that. I think it's something that, as the members of the chamber who have been elected by our ratepayers, we should be able to sit around and at least start to put some ideas down around the way. So I actually won't be supporting the motion that I've moved, and that's as a result of hearing my colleagues speak.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. And I think what you've said goes a long way to showing that we, as elected body, don't rubber stamp things, and we debate and we can change our mind, and with good debates these things can happen. So I think that's a good point, some good points there. That wrapped up that debate, so I'll now put recommendation 3 to the chamber. All those in favour? And those against? That recommendation is lost. We now move on to 12.2, the City of Victor Harbor Bridge Loading Rating Assessment. And I'll do the recommendations separately. The first one is that Council receive and note the report. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, councillor Schofield, seconded councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Councillor Henderson? Do you want to speak to it?
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Just
you.
to say, I thoroughly enjoyed reading this report. It was very informative.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or want to say anything in relation to receiving and noting the report? No, if not, I'll put it to the chamber. All those in favour? And those against? Sorry, Tim, I didn't. Are you against or for?
In favour. No, sorry, I was a little bit sidetracked.
In favour? Okay, thank you. That recommendation has carried. Thank you. The second recommendation is that council acknowledge the recommendation within Wallbridge Gilbert Aztecs load rating assessment and endorse the installation of load limit signage at Nottle Road and Wardell Bridges. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, councillor Henderson, and seconding councillor Littley. Do you want to speak to that, councillor Henderson?
Yes, I think this is a sensible thing to do so that people using those bridges know the capability and know they're going to be safe.
Thank you. And councillor Littley, do you want to speak to that? No. Does anybody want to speak to that or have any questions? Councillor Kemp and then councillor Robertson.
More of a question. I didn't get through the report, I'm afraid, but I'm just wondering, Keene Bridge, because that was in the capital budget for upgrading. I'm just wondering, did the report actually cover off on Keene Road Bridge? In that respect, because should it be in here?
Karen? Kathy, perhaps Kathy Hayter could answer that one. Thank you, Kathy. You seem to be in great demand tonight.
Yeah. Thank you. Through the Mayor, Councillor Kemp. Yes, I do believe it was in there. You're right, Keene Road Bridge is in the 21-22 budget to be done, different works to be done there. These were the only two out of the 11 so far that require the load limits signage.
Thank you, Kathy. You happy with that, councillor Kemp?
I suppose just a bit of a clarification. Did this report cover off on the load rating, that the reason why Keene Road Bridge needs upgraded because it's underrated and it needs to be upgraded to fit the new ratings for larger trucks move across it? If I'm missing something, I don't mind. But...
Through the Mayor, Councillor Kemp, I believe the Keene Road Bridges, there's a few things to be updated there against the new standards, including new culverts that underpin that bridge. So it's not just about load limits, there's a lot of other work to be done there.
Have you anything further, councillor Kemp?
No, I'm all right, I think.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Robertson, you wanted to speak to this.
Yeah, excellent report. As support Councillor Henderson on that. I'm just wondering though, one of the issues with, to me, two safety issues about the bridges that we have in this district. And one of them, of course, is the load limit. But also on many of the bridges, there are significant safety problems associated with large volumes of traffic coming into what is essentially one-lane bridges. And I was wondering why, or I would be recommending that if we do any further of these assessments of the load rating, which is important, we should also be doing assessments of, the extent to which particularly in rural areas, that the signage should be having a give way sign on one side. The bridges that are not wide enough to be able to support two-lane traffic. So, yeah, great report. I agree with what's in there. It's good stuff. But to me, if we're doing any further assessments on this, how much would it cost us to ask the engineers to include an assessment of the width of the or the capability of the bridge to handle two-way traffic? And if it's not wide enough, that the signage should also be put up to direct which direction of flow of the traffic gets priority, and the other one has to give way. I have another question too after that.
Kathy?
Thank you, through the Mayor. Councillor Robertson, in terms of how much it would cost to ask that about the traffic management as well, I have to take that on notice and find out how much it would cost to add that in.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. The second question I have is that a lot of our major bridges, some of which are not in very good shape at all, such as the railway bridge over Hindmarsh River, the Monash Bridge, that I understand these are Department of Transport bridges. Do we get from the Department, I presume that the Department of Transport is also required to undertake assessments of their bridges from time to time. Do we, Director Hayter, do we, through the Mayor, do we have, do we get those reports as to what's happening with those bridges?
Through the Mayor, I'd have to take that one on notice as well. I can look to see if we do get the department's reports. I know we liaise with the departments a lot, but whether or not they send us their business as usual reports, I'd have to check.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or any further debate on recommendation 2? Councillor Hales? Councillor Henderson, I beg your pardon. Here we are. Councillor Henderson, did you want to close the debate? No.
No, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll put recommendation 2 to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 3 is that Council recommences with the bridge load rating assessments in the 2022-23 operating budget. Could someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Littley, and seconded Councillor Henderson. You two seem to be doing all the moving and seconding tonight. Councillor Littley, do you want to speak to that?
I'm only moving things because my fat hand goes right in front of the computer. I've got my internet working really well today, so it's quick. So
that's fantastic.
Nothing else to say.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak to that?
No, thank you.
Do any of the members have any questions or have anything they'd like to contribute? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. We have done item 12.3, which was the Mud and Tars motorcycle lease. And so that brings us, we've done 12.4 as well, which is the cricket pitch. We now come to 12.5, which is the Bluff Boat Ramp toilets, the alternative options. The recommendation I can do on block, unless anybody objects, that the council receive and note the report, and the second recommendation that administration explore alternative options for the Bluff Boat Ramp toilets and present a further report back to council for consideration. Moving that way, Councillor Littley. And I beg your pardon, sorry.
I opposed on block movement.
Oh, you don't want it done on block, Councillor Kemp?
No, the reason why, because I believe recommendation 2 is already being covered on the previous recommendation for ongoing investigation. Except that we received a report back, that's great, but there's ongoing investigation currently with the current resolution, which is point 3 on page 281. In my mind, I don't think we need this number 2 recommendation. Just getting a report back on what's been done so far. I think that's all we need to have.
You are right, Councillor Kemp. We don't need to go to recommendation 2 because that's already been addressed previously. Do you want to speak to that, Victoria? No? Okay. You are correct, Councillor Lidley. So we just, Kemp, sorry. So we just need to go to recommendation 1. We don't need recommendation 2. Are you happy to move that way, Councillor Lidley? Just receiving and noting the report, and Councillor Schofield seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Does anybody have any Councillor Lidley?
Just briefly to say that we do need to find an option there, and it'd be good to find that sooner rather than later. So we need to get some sort of resolution there that we have got some boat ramp toilets there. It's a key part of the boating advisory group's recommendations that we've put to the council, that we need those sort of facilities there to support our boat ramp users and other people in the area moving through the area. So.
Yes, thank you. And I'd ask a question perhaps of administration is when would we expect a further report back for consideration about the different options that they're looking at? Victoria, can you, Kathy again? Kathy, could you respond to that, please?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, we're still talking with the owners of whalers, but just about what those lease conditions might look like, because obviously if we go ahead and do some development at the whalers, it's on private land. So before we come back to the chamber for an actual decision, we just wanted to clarify with the whalers owners what that might look like and what the costs will be that might be involved in that. At the moment, we know that the kind of works that would be required at whalers would be in the vicinity of $100,000 to $120,000, and that would go to operating because it's on private land. So we have looked at the alternate, which is the Franklin Parade whalers, the existing toilet there, and adding to that an all-access extension, if you like, which would obviously be on our land and therefore be able to be capitalised. But since writing this report and thinking about the operating versus the capital, we have also come up with a third option of looking at on Jagger Road there, above the the highest car park behind whalers there, potentially putting in an all-access toilet there, acknowledging that the whalers Road Franklin Parade option is still about 750 metres away from the boat bluff ramp. So if we can put one up behind the car park there on Jagger Road, that might meet the objectives of being on our land and being our works, our capital investment, and also being closer to the boat ramp. We're just at the moment looking at the engineering that would be required in terms of linking it for all access and the gradients of the road there, the footpaths, the ramps, etc., and what that might mean. So we are looking at all of those and what the cost implications would be as operating versus capital before we come back to the chamber for a formal decision. So hopefully we'll have that to you. I'm still hopeful that we'll come back to you before September.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Councillor Glasbrook, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Look, I'd just like to agree with Councillor Lidley. We definitely need some toilets down there. I hope that we don't just discount or continue to discount toilets down there on Franklin Parade, right near the boat ramp. I think if we had gone out to public consultation with a modest toilet block rather than a very large, extreme version of a toilet block, we wouldn't have received anywhere near the negative feedback that we did. So I believe, that we should still consider pushing forward down there, but perhaps in a more smaller option that's not quite as prominent.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. I'd actually ask the administration whether or not we can, in one of our workshops, Victoria and Kathy, actually have a discussion about the different options with the public toilets down there that you come up with, including a much smaller version of the original option. This isn't the place to debate that because that's not the motion on the floor. But I do think that it's worth us having a more informal discussion about that and brainstorming some ideas. So if you could perhaps just put that in the back of your head. I don't think it needs a motion. Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Charles, you wanted to speak?
Thank you. At some time, I recall the idea was to take the one down at the bottom of Whalers Road and get rid of it altogether. Observation that the reason why people don't complain about that one, well, of course, it went in many years ago, probably some 50 years ago. It was built by Virgin Builders. It's a stone building and it's quite attractive. It's something that melds in with the environment, and by adding to that, that's wonderful. It does some disability compliance. There's not a problem with that. So if it's done in the same tasteful way, I think it should remain forever. And really, the boat ramp toilets, I'm informed, what they were looking for was just a men's and women's and disability, all three together in the one room. And if it was done in a stone fashion once again, that would be quite sufficient, because it's just not used that frequently that they need to have so many pans and so on and so forth, and baby change areas and such. So it's just really for that purpose. I don't really know how we're going to get up the hill, but there was also another mention here on the page 182 or 181, whatever it was, that we'd have yet another set of toilets to clean. Well, we have that anyway if we had built the new one at 188,000. So, whether it's built in a stone style and, we use a Freemason or a stone mason style of thing, we can make attractive toilets along that beachfront and take into account that if they're placed at the end of a road, for example, Tabernacle Road, there's probably no space, but you're not within eyesight or eye view of the residents' properties. They're looking straight out to sea. They'll see it to one side or another would be ideal. I see you thinking there, Mayor, because you've got a lot of walking along there. There's no space there at Tabernacle, but there may be something further down the road again when we require it, if we require it that way. But it's the boat ramp that we're concerned about, and I know we will have a meeting on this or something, and we'll get on with it.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Are there any further questions or any further commentary on that, Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like some clarity on this, so I'll have a couple of questions to begin with. Is in the budget for 21-22, have we got the provision of Portaloos, the temporary toilets down at the Bluff Boat Ramp included in the budget?
Kelly, could you perhaps answer that?
Yes, thank you. Through the Mayor. Yes, there is an allowance within the budget. We've kept that in at this point in time for the high peak periods only. So not for portable toilets for the entire year, but for those peak holiday periods. We also have in the report, there's also some words in there around what it would cost to refurbish those Whalers Road toilets as well. And we've tentatively penciled those in, depending on this discussion, as an allowance in the draft budget for when it's presented back to council, so that there is some allowance for you to go forward pending a decision as well.
Thank you, Kathy.
So that's great. We do have, albeit a third-rate option, we do have an option this year for that peak period, which is great. Because I just remind members that yes, we are obliged to provide disabled access to all the public toilets we have, but the primary concern over toilets down at the Bluff Boat Ramp was really for females. Which we haven't met that. Well, we can do it through Portaloos. It's a temporary fix. I think people appreciate it, but we need to do something more substantial in the future. I do appreciate that that if we are going to, which it seems we've made a decision on page 283, made a decision to keep the Whalers Road toilet block. And I'd agree with Councillor Charles that rather than having a tin extension, corrugated iron extension or whatever it was, that we try to put the disabled access onto that. That's the rules. We've got to have the disabled toilet where we have them, so let's do it. Let's get it done properly. So I would like to see clarity that, yeah, we're moving ahead with, that was the second question to, perhaps through the chair to Kelly, is that do we have the refurbishment of the, Kelly said that it was tentatively penciled in, but not inked in. So to me, it would be, let's ink it in. We've been through this with the public consultation. People do not want that toilet block pulled down. Therefore, ipso facto, we can't make it into a gardener's shed. It has to be made into a toilet. Let's do the job properly, put the disabled toilet in. It is a bit of a waste to have two toilets within, 400 metres of each other when the average distance in Victor between toilets is probably a kilometre. But never mind. I would like to see that we agree, perhaps in this recommendation, that we go ahead with the Whalers toilet block upgrade this 21-22 year. But I do agree with the comments made about the having an actual toilet facility. The boat ramp down at the bluff there attracts an enormous number of people into Victor. And just to remind people that it's not just those that are with boats, but we are increasingly having huge numbers of people coming down to use that boat launching facility for big duck tours until they have their new landing on the side of the causeway built at the end of the year. But the sea charters down here, whether it's for fishing or for going out and looking at the islands offshore, is the business is growing extremely well, and has resulted in the main charterer purchasing even bigger boats. So we get a lot of visitors down to that area, and it is pretty poor show when you get thousands of people turning up down there, and there is not a proper toilet facility down there. It wouldn't be acceptable on any of the oval facilities, and and for the females that go down there, it's really quite critical. To me, we need to move on urgently to getting a toilet block. I think the options have been well worked through.
Councillor Robertson, your time is up. If you would like some more time to express what you want to in this debate, we can ask the other members. You've probably got about 30 seconds. Do you need some more time? The chamber can give you more time.
No, 30 seconds. The administration's done a great job on the options with regard to whalers. Waste of time, waste of money, huge costs, and we need to come back and do what Councillor Glasbrook was talking about, a modest version of what we went through before in the same location.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Does anybody else have any other questions? We're receiving and noting the Bluff Toilet Ramp report. Anyone have any questions or commentary on that? Councillor Littley, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I'll just say that I'm quite pleased that both Councillor Glasbrook and Councillor Robertson have brought up the fact that not to completely, well, it sounds like we haven't completely wiped off the table the idea of putting the location of the toilet block in that location that we proposed, the more modest structure. I'm supportive of that. I'm also supportive of retaining the Whalers Road toilet block and upgrading to a point. With the lines that we get, they're probably all the way back and we'll pass it. They might even get back to Tabernacle Road, Councillor Charles. The lineups that we get for the boat ramp, they'll be able to jump out their car and use the toilet and get back in and wouldn't have moved too far at some times. But provided, so long as we've got provision in the peak periods with, even if it is temporary toilets at this stage, while we make sure that we get the right plan, I'll be happy with that. So receiving that, the report, it is the only recommendation that we've got in this 12.5 now. So
Thank you, Councillor Littley. I now put the recommendation that council receive and note the report to the chamber. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. 12.6, the Rotary Youth Driver Awareness Program, Ewan Terrace Road closure. I will do that recommendation en bloc. It's receiving and noting the program and the road closure report. And council, then the second recommendation is council exercising its delegation in relation to the road closures. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales, and seconded Councillor Robertson.
Sorry, Mayor Jenkins, I'm actually putting my hand up to declare a conflict of interest, not to move the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Can you tell me what your conflict is?
Totally. I have perceived conflict of interest as a member of the Rotary Club of Victor Harbour for this matter. However, as I'm just a member and the club doesn't directly receive a financial benefit, I believe I can manage my interest and stay in the chamber and vote.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. I'm also a member of the Victor Harbour Rotary Club, and I therefore probably have I do have a perceived interest. It is only a perceived interest, and I will be staying here chairing the meeting and giving a casting vote if I need to.
Jenkins, myself, as a member of the Encounter Bay Rotary Club, so I'll have perceived conflict of interest, stay in the chamber.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson. You need to turn your microphone on.
Yeah, likewise, Mayor, member of the Victor Harbour Club, and it's a very weak perceived link. This rider program costs the clubs money. There's nothing to be gained out of for the clubs out of it. But yeah, I have a perceived conflict of interest, and I'll stay here. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Do I have somebody to move that recommendation en bloc? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconding Councillor Henderson. Would either of you like to speak to it?
Yes, look, I just say what a wonderful program this is, and thank both of the Rotary clubs for taking this on.
Yes, indeed, I'd echo those thoughts, Councillor Schofield, and it is well known that program does save lives, which is really important in terms of how young people learning to drive, especially in country areas. Councillor Henderson, did you want to say anything? No. Councillor Kemp, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Mayor Jenkins. Just a question for the CEO. Recommendation 2, you've already have delegation to do road closures, so is this required, this recommendation, or is it just a notification?
It is actually required. I have the ability to close our roads. This is actually a combining intersection with a state road and our road.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or any further commentary? Councillor Schofield, there really wasn't any debate for you to close, so I'll put this to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's unanimously supported or carried. Thank you very much. We now come to 12.7.
Jenkins,
yes.
I just ask for some leave. I've just got a bit of a sore back, and I'm just going to try to adjust that for 5 minutes.
Sure. I'm just wondering. It is 10 to 8. Normally we have a break at 8 o'clock. Karina, is that right?
Yeah, I just saw the time. I'm sorry. I can hold on. Yep.
Well, I was going to say, if you'd like to have an early break, we can have a break for 10 minutes and come back at 8 o'clock, if people are happy with that. Can you put your hand up if you're happy to have a 10-minute break now?
Thanks, people. My back's just frozen up, and I just need to adjust that. Sorry.
No problems. I'll see you at 8 o'clock. I'll see you all at 8 o'clock. Tell me when you. Okay. Thank you. I think if everybody's back, we will get started again. Welcome back to the gallery. I've had a message from Councillor Robertson to say that he's had to leave for another meeting, so he won't be with us for this next part of the meeting. Although I can still see him on the screen here. Councillor Robertson, are you there? Okay. I'll just check the email that he sent me.
You're not looking at my bald head, are you?
I beg your pardon?
You're not looking at my bald head, Mayor, are you? It was Councillor Littley. I can't see him on the screen.
No, Councillor Robertson has sent me an email saying seeking leave of meeting. I think that means that he's had to go, so he won't be with us for the rest of the meeting. But I think everybody else is here. Tell me if I'm wrong. Yeah, they're all here. Okay. We're now up to item 12.7, which is the State Bicycle Fund funding deed. And I'll do that recommendation en bloc unless anybody objects to that. And the first part is that receiving and noting the report. The second part is Councillor agreeing to enter into a funding deed with the Minister for Infrastructure and Transport for the stage 2 of the widening and resurfacing of the Encounter Bikeway between Kent Reserve and Rosetta Head. And the third part is that the Mayor and the CEO be authorised to sign and seal it. So you happy? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. You happy to move that way? Thank you. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Littley. Sorry, just need to move that. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Kemp?
Yes, I think there's a great opportunity in that we have got some grant funding to help offset the cost to our community, and I think widening of the bikeway has been a great success. I have had some people concerned about loss of beach through the widening by putting extra rocks down there to build up the area. I was sort of assured them that I don't think there's beach is being lost, but I think when you look at what is currently being replaced and what is currently there in the old bikeway, you can see a huge difference between it, and I think a lot of people do enjoy it. More safety, and there may be a small of the beach may be encroached, but mainly it's only where the sand dunes and the grass area is anyway on the edge currently. So I think it's a great initiative, and I think we should continue to build that.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Yes, I've received some fantastic feedback from people in relation to the just over kilometre that we have already done. Councillor Littley, do you want to speak to the recommendation? No. Does anybody have any questions or want to speak to the recommendations? If not, I'll put them to the chamber. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now come to minutes of council meetings, and that's 13.1. The first item is council receiving and noting the Fleurieu Regional Community Services Advisory Committee meeting of the 13th of July. Somebody like to move that way? Councillor Henderson, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to those minutes? Does anybody have any questions about those minutes or any discussion? If not, I'll put that to the chamber. All those in favour? Those against? They're carried. Thank you. The subsidiaries and representative reports, the recommendation is that council receive and note the representative reports for July 2021. Can someone move that, please? Councillor Hales, thank you. And seconded by, thank you, Councillor Schofield. You look like you're putting your hand up to stop a truck. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Does anybody have any questions in relation to the reports or want to speak to any of them? If not, I'll put it into the chamber. All those in favour of receiving them? Those against? Thank you all very much. The draft Fleurieu, we've done that one. That's 14.2, the Fleurieu Waste Authority. We now move to the Victor Harbor Horse Tram Authority, amendments to the Audit Committee terms of reference and appointment of members. I'll do those recommendations separately because there may be some relation to some of them. First recommendation is receiving and noting the report. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconding Peter Charles. Councillor Schofield, do you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? No. Councillor Charles, do you want to speak to receiving and noting the report?
Negative, no.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or want to speak to that? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The second recommendation is that Council approve amendments to the Victor Harbor Horse Tram Authority Audit Committee, terms of reference as provided at attachment A. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Mann. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody have any questions or want to speak to it? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Schedule 1 is noted in the terms of reference, but Schedule 1 is not a part of the report. So I'm just wondering, what is the composition of the membership of the Audit Committee currently, and what's changing? Just independence.
I think it is just the independent. Karen Rokoczynski, would you be able to clarify that, please?
Certainly. Through the Mayor, yeah, it's about adding an extra independent with the idea being that the number of members
Karen, it's difficult to hear you. Can you speak closer to your microphone? Did you hear that, Councillor Kemp?
I understood what Director Rokoczynski said, but I said my question is mainly what is the current composition? How many, are there dependents and things like that? So basically, the Schedule 1's not a part of the report.
My apologies. The current membership, 2 independent members and so a total of 4.
Thank you, Karen. Anything further, Councillor Kemp?
No, that's good, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or any discussion? No, I'll put that recommendation 2 to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried, thank you. Recommendation 3, the Council appoint Victor Harbor Horse Tram Authority Board Member Nigel Catt to the Horse Tram Authority Audit Committee for a term of 2 years. Move that way, Councillor Schofield. And Councillor Charles seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to that? No, Councillor Charles?
I think a good choice. Excellent choice in actual fact.
Yep, beautiful. Does anybody have any questions or want to speak to that? In that case, I'll put it to the council. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. The fourth recommendation is that council appoint Laura Hodgkinson as the 3rd independent member to the Victor Harbor Horse Tram Authority Audit Committee for a term of 2 years. Moving that way, Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Mann. And a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Littley. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody have any questions, or does anybody want to speak to that? I'll put it to the floor then. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. The mayoral report for July, the recommendation is that council receive and note that. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales, and seconded by Councillor Henderson. Does anybody have any questions in relation to the mayoral report or any commentary? I'll put that to the vote then. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you, that's carried. Elected member report. Would somebody like to move that that's received and noted? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded by, thank you, Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody have any questions or any commentary in relation to the elected member reports? I'll put that recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. There are no matters of urgency. There are no questions on notice. Are there any questions without notice? Thank you, Councillor Kemp.
Victor Harbour Oval Planning Group, do they report back to CASPAC? Is that part of the process there? Because it's not listed. Who do they report to? So get questions from the community about, there is a group there, but what's happening with it? Because we get no reports. So I'm just wondering if that's possible.
Sure, both Councillor Schofield and myself are on the elected member Oval Planning Group, and I'm not aware where the reports go. Jeremy Bell and also Kathy Hayter attend those meetings. I'll perhaps ask Kathy if the reports from those meetings go back through your department.
Through the mayor, no, I'm not. Well, they do. Jeremy does the minutes and then sends them back to the committee. As far as I know, they don't go through the council. I'd like to speak to this. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. They may go through the reports that, and Victoria, I think you've got something to say. They may go through the representative reports and the subsidiary reports that we receive. Can you? I'm just having a look to see if they're there. Victoria, can you respond to that?
Yes, I can through the mayor. So it's actually an operational group that was set up to assist with just the operations of the precinct. So it doesn't report back to CASPAC because the majority of the CASPAC working groups are more of a strategic nature. It is to feed into the management of the current leases and the operations of the Oval, and any items would normally come back through to the council. I'm happy to review those terms of reference, but it was set up as more of the operational relationship of all parties making sure they were communicating with each other, because we did have some instances where lease holders were sort of operating outside of their lease terms and not understanding how they needed to collaborate, because we have the high schools also involved in that group as a user or a leaseholder over the Oval.
Thank you. I suppose from an elected member's point of view and a community perspective, there is some type of feedback as to what some of the issues are instead of coming back through recommendations or resolutions. Get some type of informative process going on so we know what's happening there. A lot of people do know what's going on, but we tend to last to know because I get told things which I don't even know anything about. So it's hard to provide feedback. Thank you.
I'm happy to provide those notes of those meetings in the elected member update so you can see the items that are being discussed. That would probably be a first way of actually addressing that concern.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I was going to ask Kathy something about that, but I cannot remember the question. That's all right. Councillor Schofield?
Yes. Chair of that group, there's quite a lot of discussion that actually takes place from each of the representatives from each of the clubs on what their needs are. They have some really good open discussions, and anything that needs an action, then that is noted. There is no moving and seconding of anything. So it is the agreement by all of the bodies, and it's working extremely well. I think issues between two of the clubs have been overcome, and it's a more open dialogue now.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Are there any other questions without notice? No. We move on to motions on notice. And the first recommendation is that Council receive and note the motion on notice, confidential items register, Councillor Charles's report. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconded by Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report?
No, thank you.
Councillor Kemp. Does anybody want to ask any questions or any discussion on receiving and noting the report? All those in favour of receiving and noting the report, confidential items register. Those against? That's carried, thank you. Councillor Charles, would you like to propose your motion, and also noting that there's an alternative recommendation proposed by administration for you to consider?
Yes, thank you very much, and I'm happy to accept the alternative recommendation. It basically says the same thing. I'm not certain how it would normally be done, but I did describe it in a different way with a couple of bullet points. But if I just read what I wrote, so that anybody who's still awake and watching this, other than the council members and staff, are aware of what's going on. The purpose of this motion is to provide easy and immediate access to formally confidential items. For persons wishing to satisfy their interest in reading council's public files, the present system provides a list of dates, subjects and council reference numbers, but items are not accessible by the click of a mouse. As a result, these files may as well be retained in confidence unless a separate request is made to staff during office hours. And of course, that can be done. It's called FOI, and there's no argument that it's not accessible, and it can be done, but I believe it's cumbersome. I believe it's unnecessarily cumbersome and a waste of staff members' time to be retrieving or forwarding a copy of the information to the requestee. Also, many a requestee may not feel comfortable being identified making the request, or may not wish to cause inconvenience asking for a retrieval. A requestee, as we know, has the right to be anonymous. The public should at all times be able to access public information at any time, 24 hours, 7 days. The City of Victor Harbor website should provide a convenient and no contact required and immediate resolution to the requestee's needs. Essentially, if somebody's got insomnia or just is spending the long weekend, or when the council is closed overnight, whatever, during the weekend, wants to go through our files just for curiosity's sake, or they're looking for something, they need to be able to get it freely and without needing to make application for it. Should be no need. The confidential registers file sometimes shows 3 or 4 items under the same title, but different dates, different meetings. So a person would not be certain as to what one they really required if they were going to request it. This way, if it's made and released from confidence, as we're about to do tonight in the next item, releasing items that no longer will be in confidence and retaining some items still in confidence, they'll be able to find out for themselves. So that's all it is. It's just making things convenient for people and showing good, crystal clear transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Do we have a seconder for this? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I do have a question, original, if I may, to the CEO. Why has she, in her recommendation as an alternative, removed retained in confidence lists of items? Because how will people know what to ask for if they don't know what's there? Because it's in confidence, you can't see it. It's hidden away. So you understand my question?
Thank you, through the Mayor. We're required to actually have those registers, which we currently do have on the list. This is about actually making the specific documents that have been released accessible. And we did actually provide Councillor Charles with the a link to the Alexandrina Council's example. So they have a tab where you can actually click on the confidential items once they're released and actually go to the item, whereas are just the register. The registers of what has been released and what isn't released are still available on our website. We have to provide those. This is about adding the actual documents behind those. And I'm saying as of July, as my concern was if we were to do all items that have been released, that would be a significant amount of work for administration. But I'm saying as of this point, we provide all the documents that have been released. And if and when we can, administration can upload others from history, past history.
Thank you very much for that. Look, I think it's a great initiative to, again, it's about being open to our community, and I think that's great. The more we can do this, it shows our community that, you know, we are not hiding anything, because that's what the perception can be sometimes out there, that we're hiding things behind closed doors. But I think these types of processes, I think, is a great opportunity to tell the community, yes, here we are, this is what we've done, so people can be more aware and see what we are doing, especially in some great areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from any of the members or any commentary? Councillor Littley?
Yeah, I agree with this. You know, my experience is, one example is with the EPA, where their public register for underground or for groundwater contamination sites was hardly public, where you had to sit there and trial through. You didn't know what you're looking for. This is, I think, the concept that Councillor Charles has here, and I do agree that with the July 2021 starting here, not being retrospective, going back so far, it would be a great deal of work for our administration to upload all of that. But I wonder, CEO McCurdy, if the undertaking can be given, if anything is requested to be drawn out, and then that is added in this manner as well. So if it's a past thing that someone has requested, that is given at least a priority in uploading that to the site. It would have to be with some sort of restriction. You can't go and I wonder if you can go and request 100 things, and then that has the same purpose of putting everything up there, I suppose. So within reason, I guess. But if it's a genuine request for information, and we've taken the time to go back and draw that out for a certain person, then I can't see where the issue would be putting it up on the register or up on the list.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Are there any further questions or any further commentary? I now put that to the vote. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, Councillor Charles, did you want to close the debate? I beg your pardon.
Yeah, I'd like to come back on that. Councillor Littley and I agree 100%, because that thought occurred to me just before he said it, and it was that if anybody requires anything after from past information, it might be, and this is the reason why I thought of it, it might be easier for staff, we'll just say staff, I know who will do it, to just simply load that up onto the site, and then the person requesting it can view it on site. So they won't need to have anything specifically sent to them or copied to come and collect. So I think that's a great idea if the staff can do that, if our CEO can build that into this request. So within reason, within genuine requests, I think we would know. Nobody's going to go fooling around, ask for a whole lot just to be annoying. Thank you.
Thank you. I now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. Are there any motions without notice? If not, we move on to confidential items and the confidential review of confidential orders. The first recommendation is going into confidence, and so I would say goodbye to the gallery who are watching us. So we'll go.
Before you go into that, can I ask the CEO a question, please?
Yes, certainly.
If this register is already on the internet that we just said a minute ago, why do we need to go into confidence for this item?
Through the Mayor, because there may be some items you may question why they're still retained in confidence. So if you wish to discuss any of them, you'll need to discuss them in confidence. This is part of our annual review process so that we need to refresh, and the council needs to resolve to retain matters in confidence every 12 months. It's part of our legislative requirement. So again, to enable you to have those discussions, if you don't want to retain something in confidence, then we need to have that discussion in confidence, that's all. If you're just happy to move with what we've recommended, then you don't, but any discussion, you'll be a bit limited.
I think we'd like to have a discussion. I can't understand why a lot of these things are in confidence. I wanted people to know that, but that's okay.
So the first recommendation is that we go into confidence. Rather than reading that whole recommendation out, I will take it that you all have read it and that you are satisfied that pursuant to section 93G, that it's important that we consider these matters in confidence, and that the principle that the meeting being conducted in a place open to the public has been outweighed by the need to discuss the matters in confidence. Would somebody move that way, please? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded by Councillor Schofield. Is there any discussion in relation to that? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. I'll just leave it for Michelle to turn the live streaming off and